Thank you very much. Ooh, the mic is on. All right, so I'm one step ahead of Doug in that regard. He promised that he would not be difficult to follow, and he lied, because that was wildly entertaining. My approach at LinkedIn, so at LinkedIn, and what does an evangelist do at LinkedIn? This, a little bit, but half of my time is spent consulting clients of LinkedIn on how to make the most of the platform, how to put content onto the platform that will resonate with their audience insights. So I look a lot at data. I use a little bit of hunch. I have spent so many hours in the LinkedIn news feed that I should probably add some kind of special skill or endorsement to the LinkedIn news feed on my profile. So I use a bit of hunch, but I use a lot of data in the work that I do. So my approach today will be to show you some of the trends that I've seen when I look at LinkedIn data on how to get the most out of social media for your content. This is the summary of my experience when I look at the most successful brands on social media. And that is that your company is not just a logo. It is the sum of the experience of your employees. Now that is the expertise that they bring to your company. So the nerds, the geeks that you need to bring out of the shadows because they're smart and brilliant and passionate. That is their experience working for your company. If you treat your employees right, they will be the biggest advocates of the company and what you do and what it's like to work for them. And it is the way that they interact with the customers and the people and the prospects and the people that you do business with. Those three ways that people interact with your company, the experience that they bring, what it's like to work for you, and the way they interact with your customers, that's your brand. It's not the logo, and it's not the marketing messages, and it's not carefully curated and crafted anymore, because social media has really blown that all out the water. If you're inauthentic, that's going to come through. So you have to bring your employees into the room, into the conversation. Now, 4 years ago, when I started doing this kind of content consulting, because content actually became a thing in the LinkedIn feed, the number one question from the companies that I worked with was, how do I get better engagement? Now, it was better engagement for leads, better engagement for awareness, better engagement for advocacy. The end result was different, but that was really the number one question. So being a data person and being a consultant, I started looking at the data and the trends. And I noticed three pieces of data, or three trends, that really brought the best companies onto LinkedIn and onto social in the most effective way. So I'm going to share those with you. This is Olivia, by the way. She works in our Singapore office, and I'll share why that's important with you later. So bringing employees into your content strategy is the most effective way to become a great social brand. If we all did this, if we all got the most out of our employee wisdom, our employee talent experience, and our employee interaction with customers, we would win the war on talent, we would win the war on customer engagement, and we would win the war on content. And the head of social media at any company would suddenly be one of the most powerful people in the boardroom. That's the goal, that's the dream, is to make social and content a channel or a tactic or an approach that actually drives business results and gets us a seat at the table. So the first that I'm going to talk about today is employee shared content. This is employee advocacy. This is a fairly common topic anymore. It's been out in the industry for a little while. There are entire companies that are built around this. So we'll talk about that first. The other two are employee-generated content. So what happens when the content that you're sharing actually comes from your employees, and what kind of validity does that bring to your brand? And then the third is employee-featured content, so actually featuring human beings in your content. And they bring three different results. So employee-shared content, the reason that employee advocacy has become such a trend is because it is proven to get better reach and better engagement on social media. Very, very top line. Some may call them vanity metrics, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they lead to real results if you look at the back end of things. The employee-generated content is important for expertise and credibility, and the employee-featured content can be really helpful in differentiating your brand and actually giving you something unique to say, or some kind of unique way to present yourself to your audiences. So the first pillar, employee-shared content. Now, when I started looking at the data that LinkedIn has on the brands that were doing well on LinkedIn, I noticed a couple of things. But before I do that, I am going to ask you guys, based on the numbers, based on the data, if you were only looking at the data, which channel do you think would have the highest distribution potential? The company page, which in this instance, LinkedIn's company page has 2 million followers, or the employee networks, and in this case, LinkedIn has 11,800 employees. 2 million followers, 11,000 employees. How many people would assume number 1 has better distribution potential? How many people would assume number 2 has better distribution potential? Good, we're going in the right direction. Fantastic. I don't have to call any of you out for giving the wrong answer. Yes, a company's employees have on average 10 times more first-degree followers than their company, first-degree connections than their company page has followers. So if your company page has 200,000 followers and you're really happy with that, your employees will have on average 2 million first-degree connections. The smaller the company, the bigger the multiplier. So if you're a small company, your employees become even more powerful than if you're a larger company like LinkedIn or Microsoft. Now, beyond just the reach potential, employee sharing increases engagement. And we did a member study last year, which is what kinds of content or what sources of content do you consider most influential? And not surprisingly, being a social network, peers and colleagues won out over brands and influencers. Now, peers and colleagues won out over influencers. So influencer marketing, which is great, especially for B2C brands, and people trying to get influencers onto the LinkedIn platform, that's great, but that's only a small piece of the pie. You're missing a much bigger piece of the puzzle if that's all you're focusing on. And then, of course, the engagement rate and the click-through rate. And employee shared content sees on average twice the click-through rate and twice the engagement rate of the exact same content actually coming from your brand. So you can put it out through your company logo, but if you put it out through your employees, your customers, your advocates, you'll see twice the level of engagement. Basic stuff, okay? Now, everybody loves to talk about GE and how brilliant they are in content marketing, so let's throw up a GE quote into this mix, yeah? GE uses our employee advocacy tool and talks about how when they get their content into the hands of their salespeople, the salespeople share it with prospective clients, with customers, with prospective talent, and that engagement is often much more effective than a standard communications campaign. So you don't believe me? Fine, believe GE. And more LinkedIn data. Here's another statistic to throw out there for those of you who are tweetable people. For every 6 pieces of content that an employee shares, no matter what the content is or what it drives to or what the source is, for every 6 pieces of content that you share on LinkedIn, that tends to generate 6 job views to your company's job page. So it's an individual sharing it, but as a result, people are like, oh, Jimmy works at LinkedIn. I wonder if LinkedIn's hiring. We are, by the way. 3 company page views. So again, an individual sharing it, and it's driving people to look at your company and your brand and what that presence looks like. 1 company page follower, and then in addition to that, profile views and connection requests for the individual that's actually doing the sharing. This is where the differentiation on social media is you have an individual identity, but then you usually have some kind of group identity that goes with that. And on LinkedIn, of course, being the professional platform, that group identity is your company. So, the intersection of the corporate content and the individual identity is where content and social comes together. So content comes from the brand, social comes from the individual. If we can get this content into the hands of the individual, then we can get the brand visible on social. I probably should have done some kind of X diagram here, but that's okay. You guys get the point, yes? You're with me? Good. All right. Simple, quick, to the point. I think you guys are all aware of this, but this is where it gets interesting. Employee-generated content. How many people here have heard of user-generated content, or UGC? How many people here have heard of EGC? Good, so I'm talking about something new today. Fantastic. You probably already have employee-created content. You might have people who have posted things on SlideShare. This is Brett Wallace. He works at LinkedIn. He's an artist. He did this illustration thing on corporate culture at LinkedIn. Or via hashtags. We have a hashtag LinkedIn Life. I never use it. Nobody in UK ever uses it, but people around the world use it. So you may have a hashtag campaign, or you may have employees posting about your experience on Instagram. You may have people writing on the LinkedIn publishing platform. Every single time I go to meet with a company and I look at the publishing platform and if any of their employees are publishing, I almost always find at least 1 or 2 rogue people that are writing, and the corp comms department has no idea about it. And it creates a very interesting conversation in the room. A little bit of panic sometimes, but that's okay, because that panic can turn into opportunity. Okay? So you may already have it out there. Check your sources. Here's the role that it plays in your strategy. look, my friend Alex, who works for a company called Group SJR, wrote this beautiful article for Harvard Business Review, and in it he described content as the fact that brands are no longer just peddling products, they're producing, unearthing, and distributing information, which is great. Now, he works at GE, and GE does this all the time. Here's the problem with just looking at content through that lens. Brands aren't always perceived to be the most credible source of information because of the marketing barrier, because they're always putting their best foot forward, because we know that if content is coming from a brand, it's coming from somebody in the marketing department, and it is still only one lens, and a lot of times that still isn't going to get the trust that it needs. So now Edelman, are you guys familiar with the Edelman Trust Barometer report? It's been measuring the state of trust over the last 10 plus years. 10 years ago, Edelman measured the trust, the shift in trust from influencers and CEOs and executives to colleagues and peers, people like me. So if your brand is the only thing that you're using, your logo is the only thing that you're using to produce and distribute your content, you're missing where people are actually getting their information and the sources that they trust. If all you're doing is putting your CEO forward, you're missing where people actually are getting that trustworthy information. Thought leadership comes in all forms. Here's a couple of examples. Okay, I was doing this conference on public relations in Edinburgh last year, and I found some really fantastic examples of just everyday individuals who were writing articles, and the democratization of influence on social, I think is what I called it. It was something awful like that. But here's some examples of this, yeah? Here's a woman who is the head coach of a women's rugby team on the east coast of the US. She wrote an article, an open letter to the athlete, We Must Stop Recruiting, and it was about coaching and leadership and getting the right mindset of the athletes into the program. That very same week, Sir Alex Ferguson, who is an influencer, formerly of Manchester United, he's a blah, 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 he's got all these titles. He also wrote an article about leadership in the industry, and her article got, look at all the vanity metrics, more comments, more views, more likes, more shares. Yeah, she got more attention for just telling the truth and speaking like a normal human being from somebody who had many, many years of experience in the industry, more kind of visibility, more engagement, more comments, more conversation than somebody who is actually an influencer. Influencer with a big capital I. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? It's nice to have, but it's not necessary. And when you empower your employees to write about their experiences, you find the most passionate people in the room. Two examples, one from Statoil about their offshore project in Scotland, one from GE. Now, the head of the project at Statoil wrote an article about offshore wind about a month or so before the CEO of renewable energy for GE wrote an article about offshore wind. And the guy from Statoil, again, like all the vanity metrics, more visibility, more views, more engagements, more likes, more comments, more shares. Maybe a better network? I'm not sure. But it's the passion and the expertise, and it comes from all titles, and it comes from all places in your organization. You all have this in your company. You just have to find it, and you have to enable people to bring it out. This is kind of the final frontier for honest communication and PR. Okay, there's a company called Monsanto. Is anybody here familiar with Monsanto? A few. They're an agriculture company, right? They do seeds and pesticides, and it's kind of what they're known for. They have an initiative apparently right now to save pollinators. Now, this guy, who's the CTO of Monsanto and has been writing about the company's business on LinkedIn for a while, wrote an article. And some of the comments were, I was really interested in this topic until I saw what company you work for, and now I'm a little skeptical, but thanks for bringing the dialogue to the table. That's a heck of a lot better than if you just Google Monsanto, because the first thing that you get is all the press, some from trustworthy news sources, maybe some from questionable news sources, about all the bad things that Monsanto is doing to the ecology and to farmers, and they just get so much bad press that if all Monsanto ever did was put up on their website the butterfly challenge and how we need to save our pollinators, they would have zero credibility on this. They have to put people forward, because it's a lot harder to be really mean to a person than it is to a company or a logo. And you need to start a dialogue around this. If you have no credibility in a subject, but you have to start talking about it, or if you have a bunch of bad press, but you need to start a dialogue about something, you have to do it through individuals. So this is when it becomes a necessity, but those previous two examples are just when it becomes a smart thing to do. Now, okay, so I talked about how you probably all have employee-generated content, and it can be really helpful in building trust and credibility and showing off your advocates and bringing out the geeks and all this stuff. But where does it get hosted? Where do you put this stuff? Do you wait for the YouTube channel to get 100,000 to 200,000 subscribers on quilting? Do you wait for the whiteboard series to hit critical mass on your blog? Both. Now, context matters. Here's David Hone. He's the Chief Climate Officer at Shell. And he had written an ebook on carbon pricing, and he had a blog, and he put up videos on YouTube about carbon pricing. The problem is that, as it turns out, nobody's really going to YouTube to look for videos on carbon pricing, so it didn't get much traffic. So he started writing on LinkedIn, and that's where he found his traction. You have to kind of figure out where your audience is, start to see where some of that early engagement and early passion, early conversation comes through, but you have to test and you have to put it out on multiple channels, yeah? At the very least, repurposing the stuff that you're doing gets you additional visibility and additional audience. This example is from a guy from Microsoft who wrote an article for Huffington Post that exact same day, put the exact same article on his own profile on LinkedIn, and the Huffington Post article got, 30 social shares, and the LinkedIn article got like hundreds or thousands of social shares. I'm talking about visibility and brand building and just basic like fundamentals of marketing, which is like reach, engagement, and frequency. Now, I always get this question when I start to talk about this, but doesn't duplicate content penalize you when it comes to SEO? No, it doesn't seem to. Now, when we do this at LinkedIn, we put something up on our LinkedIn blog, we give it a couple weeks, we let it build SEO juice, then we repurpose it on our own profile, and we link back to the original source, just to be safe. But this guy did it on the exact same day, Huffington Post and LinkedIn profile, and when I did a search for his key term, the Huffington Post article came up on page 1. The LinkedIn Post article didn't, but it didn't seem to harm the fact that he still got a page 1 result for the HuffPo article, yeah? So I don't think you'll be penalized. General best practice is whatever channel you need the SEO on, try to build it there first, and then republish it, link back. And the search engines seem to do a pretty good job of identifying the original source. Okay. So employee shared content, employee generated content. We're coming near the end, guys. We're going to have lots of time for questions. Employee featured content. This is actually fairly easy to do. This is the easiest one out of all of them. Let's see. We did Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to Content Marketing. We did a promotion around it. We had the image on the left, stock photography from our photographer, somebody typing away. The image on the right with one of our own marketers featured in it. Obviously, the one on the right got better click-through and better conversion. But what do you guys think the lift was? Who says 20%? 30? 40? 50? 60? 70? 80? 90? 100? 160. 160% lift in click-through rate and a 290% lift in conversion rate, just from the image. I promise you the rest of the post was exactly the same. The call to action, the URL, the copy, everything. Just putting one of our marketers in the image boosted click-through rate and conversion rate by that much. Do I have your attention? Images of people perform better. That's my generic best practice? No, I hate generic best practices. This is why. Generic best practices lead to generic content. If I tell my clients images of people perform better, this is what happens. I apologize if any of you in the room belong to one of these companies. Stop it. Break this assumption that we can just follow generic best practices and be safe and be on brand and still stand out. You can't. You're just going to look like every other brand that is safe, that has followed that generic best practice, okay? Instead of doing that, you can do this. You can identify photography talent within your organization. How many amateur photographers or hobbyists do we actually have? Every company has one. Every company has a musician, and every company has a photographer, or somebody who is aspiring to be a photographer, or somebody who likes to take pictures and has a nice camera and does it on the weekends, yeah? Find that, get them set up with some learning courses, and get them to take pictures of your facilities, of your staff, of your events. make sure that they're high res, and start to use them in your marketing. Every single one of these images that appears in the LinkedIn blog has come from some picture that Jason Miller took, except for the cat, which is not Jason's. This is our marketing director's. And I don't know why she wrote a blog post about cats and marketing, but she did, so she used her own cat. And yeah, again, third-party credibility. Cisco just recently did this for their new talent portal, where they identified a couple of photographers in their company, and they brought in a photographer for hire, and all the 200 plus images on their website are actually of employees in their real working environments. And it's meant, I mean, if you want to show what it's like to work at a place, you can't use stock photography, right? It's pretty important. Being people first has benefits beyond the engagement rate. Now, if you have the goal of demonstrating corporate social responsibility, there's a lot of talk in the industry right now about purpose-driven marketing or purpose in business and how powerful that is, especially in today's place and time. But if you're going to talk about corporate social responsibility or how the values of your company are manifested in your business, you have to do that through your people. Unilever does a really great job of this on LinkedIn, where every single one of their kind of CSR pillars is told through the lens of the employees that are actually in the markets and working on these projects. Whether that's clean water or newborn health or whatever it is, they always do it through the lens of an employee story. Or if it's talent brands. If you're looking to recruit people into your organization, the only way that you can actually do that is go beyond a day in the life type stuff and start to feature people in your content and in your stories. That's it, guys. This is employee shared content, employee featured content, and employee generated content. If you just took one of these things, you would start being exponentially more effective on social media. If you incorporated two, you'd start to see real results to your business. If you incorporate all three, I promise you, the new head of social for your company will be the rock star in the marketing organization. All right, so how do you get started? Well, how many of you guys know what your social media policy says? Yeah, like 2. Oh, 3, good. I talked to a lot of heads of corp comms and CMOs and heads of social, and they don't know what their social media policy is. They don't know when the last time they wrote it was. They don't know how often it's actually socialized to employees. They don't know how easy it is to follow, and they don't know how much they're encouraging their employees to be open, honest, constructive, transparent. So review it. Make it as simple as possible. Remove barriers to entry. Trust your people to be grown-ups and to be reasonable human beings. Remind them that being a reasonable human being is good for their own personal brand as well as for your company brand. Make it as simple, effective, and barrier-free as possible and allow people to participate. The second is create an advocacy plan. There are people in your company that are already very active on social media. They have followers, but maybe they're not necessarily doing it from a professional standpoint or from behalf of the company. So start with an advocacy plan. Identify the people that are active. Give them some content to share. Make sure that they understand your social media policy. Give them a new headshot. Give them a new profile. And start with just sharing content and create some internal success stories. Once you have them actively sharing content, then the writing part comes next. Writing is a really scary thing even for people who write regularly. So if you just get them to start sharing first, and you see the benefits of that engagement and they see the benefits of that engagement, then the actual creation of content will come a little bit more easily. You know, to hit a share button is a lot easier than to hit the publish button, trust me. And finally, don't forget executive sponsorship. Now, this is probably the #1 mistake that most companies make. Either they don't have an executive sponsor. The reason that that's a mistake is if people think that they're going to lose their job by saying the wrong thing on social media, they're not going to do it. If you have an executive sponsor and somebody that's leading by example, that makes it a lot easier for the employees to understand what the tone is or what's okay and what's not. The second biggest mistake that I see people make is they pick the CEO because it's the CEO and the CEO hates LinkedIn and Twitter. And there's like a whole long road to go down to get them up, to get them a profile and to get them to understand how to tweet and all this stuff. Don't do that. Just find somebody that actually, I don't know, likes LinkedIn or likes Twitter or maybe is even like on Facebook because their family is. Find somebody that actually understands social media a little bit. Pick that person and get that person to be your sponsor. Otherwise, it's all going to be an uphill battle. Okay. And contribute. You can't actually say, hey, let's have our employees create content, or let's showcase employees in our latest blog, if you yourselves are not actually writing and being featured and sharing and contributing. So if you get started, review your social media policy, get your executive sponsor, you're well on your way to being a lot more effective with your content on social media.